So to give you an idea of the shape I want to make, I'm going to start by making it in a very basic way. So I'm going to right click and create a cube, and right click again and create a cylinder. Select the cylinder and move it along the y-axis an arbitrary amount. With that cylinder still selected, right click, scale uniform, hold the the control key down and scale it down, say 80%, and then space to deselect. So what I want to do is place this cylinder on the 6 faces of this cube. So if I select this bottom face of the cylinder and then right click and then use the put on command. Now if I left click on the put on command and select face, it'll just move this cylinder to that location. If I right click, as I am doing so now, I have the option of selecting multiple faces, and what this will do is clone this shape onto those faces. So if you look in the bottom right hand corner, you can see that it says R to execute. So if I do that now, that was a right click, and you can see I've got the cylinders on those faces. This first one is still selected, so if I go to select entire object and hit delete, that will leave me with my basic shape. As an embellishment to this idea, what I intend to do is I'll select one of the faces on here, use I for identical, right click and intrude those a bit like so, and what I want to do is be able to see through this shape, so I have to select the faces on each of these cubes, press I for identical, and then I'll inset those faces so I can't see them anymore on the outside, and then intrude on the inside. So there we go, that's just very roughly created my shape. So the drawback of this, well, I'll hit the tab key so you can see the geometry is, well, I don't think it'll render very nicely judging by this. Hit the tab key again so you can see that's the shading implications. If we look inside, it's not a very tidy mating of the circle and the cube there. I'd like that to be smoother. And speaking of smoothing, if I select the entire object and smooth it, because the cylinders aren't connected to the cube in any way, then they smooth individually, and you can see in the geometry graph that they're all existing as separate objects. Anyway, so what I want is an object that looks like this, preferably with sharp-ish corners on the cube and these cylinders, but these still have sharpish corners here, that when it renders will look much nicer than that has the potential to look, and that is all one object. So let us begin again with a different strategy. So I'm going to start by creating a cube as I did before, and a cylinder as I did before, and lifting the cylinder up. So I'll move that along the y-axis. Right, so let us ponder then the implications. Well, actually, let's look at this. This cube's not looking very cube-like. So what can I do to improve the appearance of that? Well, I can select the entire object and then inset each side a bit. If I do that, then the faces look flatter and we've got some rounding on these corners. But if I continue by smoothing that at a later stage, as I did last time, you can see that these corners don't retain their shape. They collapse. So obviously this kind of geometry, just by insetting each of the corners there, is not maintaining its shape. So let's try something else. Well, I could try beveling each corner, and then when I smooth that, you can see that the cube shape is retained. However, under these circumstances, when it's not smoothed, the faces are still not looking flat. So there's something a bit iffy about that, which I don't really know the answer to, but it's certainly not right. So let us try supporting the faces in a different way. I'll select one of these edges, use G, press C to connect them, and then bevel that out till it's, I don't know, 0.9, there you go, from the edge, and do that on each of these faces. So this is like sort of creating supporting geometry, and then we'll do that, and then press tab, see how that looks. Okay, that's looking okay. And critically, let's try smoothing it. So press S for smooth, S for smooth again. You can see that it's well behaved when it's smooth. So this kind of structure looks like a good supporting geometry. But we're still left with the problem of mating these two together. So let's see. We've got our cylinder here, and I'll just scale it again. So I'll scale uniform and do it, what did I do last time, 80%? Yeah, I think so. And move it a bit closer to my cube. Right, if I want to bridge this face to that face, I would need the same number of edges. And at the moment this has got 4 and this has got that's 16, isn't it? Okay, I know that because I counted it before. So I can't really count that fast. What I'm going to do is I'm going to subdivide this cube up again for this face, so I can create a square in here with 16 edges. So if I go G and then C, actually I'll go back one step and bevel that out, so I'll just bevel that out, I don't know, to about there, so that's 0.5, and then go G, C, bevel, 0.5 again, and then G key, C, and then select another edge, and G and C. So there we go. And what this will do for me, you can see this has got 1, 2, 3, 8 on that side, but this has got there's 16 on this cube here. Right, so if I delete that cube and then just inset it, it'll retain the same number of sides, but I want to keep it away from this supporting edge. And then, well, you can see there's a bit of a mismatch here. I'll be connecting a square to a circle. So if I go to edge mode now, having had that face selected and deleted the geometry inside, I can just circularize that. Whoops, I seem to have got another face selected. Ah, there, must have done that accidentally. So just use Ctrl Z to go back, deselect everything with space, select that again, go to edge, and where was I? Circularizing. So I can use circularize to give myself a circle there, but I needed to inset it. I forgot that step when I was doing that, so you can see where the problem was there. It was pulling that corner apart. So I inset it again. It doesn't really matter what size, because when I circularize it, like so, there we go, I can now determine the size of that circle. And I want that circle to be, well, about the size of that circle there. So to achieve that, what I shall do is lower this down. So I'll move it on the y-axis into my shape, press W to select wireframe view, space to deselect, temporarily hide that, select this circle, unhide it, and then scale uniform till it's of the same size as that one, or roughly speaking it is. So press space to deselect, select my cylinder again, I can move it up along the y-axis, I can deselect wireframe from here, and then I shall select this bottom face, press plus to extend my face selection, hit delete. That bottom face is still selected. Select this face and bridge. So there you go. I've done that. I'm going to move that down a bit, so it's roughly the same height as the cube. So at this point now this is connected to this cube. Hit tab to have a look at any geometric problems that might be occurring. So you can see there's something funny happening in this region. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in another supporting line. If I do it here, oops, space to deselect, if I do it here and do a loop and bevel, because that's at an angle, although it looks good there, it's still not sorted that issue out. So what I need to do is select one of these edges here, press G, press C to connect them, and then I can either use the the slide command, but you can see that's not managing to really either be a proper circle or a square there, so that's not very helpful. So I could just circularize it again. I know it's here somewhere. There we go. And that has created a nice bit of supporting geometry there. And the closer that is to that inner edge will mean the sharper that ends up looking, and how it responds when it's smooth. So if I select this again, loop and circularize it out, and then press tab, then you can see the corner won't end up as sharp, and that'll be the case when it's smoothed. So if I smooth it now, we can see what the tops collapse, so that's going to be sorted. But this is not as sharp as it would be when it's smoothed again. It creates a gentler gradient, depending how close that edge is to that one. If I wanted to make this smaller, I could do it this way. If I want to select that top. I can't select it as a loop because there's no internal geometry there, but I can select that face, then select that edge, then select that one, press L for loop, and if I do circularize now, I can circularize the whole thing in a bit, and then just adjust the geometry this way by selecting an edge, loop, and circularize. There we go. So I just made that a little bit smaller. At the top here, so I could do with another edge coming up to this edge in that direction, another edge coming up to that edge in that direction. So select this edge here, press G, press C, and then bevel that out, and then you can pop in simultaneously a couple of supports. And at this point I've got to consider that there's no point in doing anything else with this top, even though it looks a bit dicey, because I want to simultaneously intrude this entire shape, which means I've got to sort out adding each of these cylinders to each of the faces of the cube. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'll select the bottom four faces there and just press plus to extend the selection until I can delete all that side and I'm left with a face. And then I just move this up on the, whoops, select the entire thing and move the entire thing up out of the way temporarily and create another cube. Now this cube face will match that cube face in dimension at least. So I'll just show you this. If I select this face here and select right click and left click on put on, and then left click on that and then right click to execute, it has put that on that face. So at this point you might think that it will be possible to weld those two faces together. So I've selected the entire object and I'll just do weld, but it says there are no faces found to weld, and the reason for this is that although those two faces that I selected, I'll just move this up out of the way again now, are indeed identical in area, if you select the vertexes you can see that this face has got this distribution of vertexes on its sides, which means that it can't weld to this face because part of the characteristic of the weld command is it needs to match the vertexes up to weld them, and they can't match because you've got these extra vertexes. Now I could delete the vertexes from this edge and get it to weld then, but we would end up with funny geometry because really we're aiming to have only these quads, these four-edged areas, these four-edge polygons. That's the ideal situation for sending for rendering, and if you start having things with more than that are called n-gons, then sometimes the renderers can't deal with that and you have strange results, strange shading effects like you have in here, or it's appearing in different places. So to avoid that situation where we have these n-gons and triangles, I don't know what the situation is with triangles. They seem to be okay, but they don't seem to be highly desirable for some reason. I don't know much about that, but what I do know is I can't weld these two faces together until I match the these vertexes. So to sort that out, what I need to do is carve this one, so G and C, up in the same way as I did the last one, which will take a few moments but isn't very difficult. So I just need to remember, whoops, to bevel this the same amount, so that was 0.5, the figures there on the left, and that's one lot. So it's G, C, and bevel it out to the edge, holding the shift key down, control key down, giving me exact values, which is good. Bevel, so 0.5, because it does have to be exact, otherwise we start after using the options in the weld command that allows you to get away with less exact lining up, and then you can run into problems because you can accidentally weld things you didn't want to weld. So C and bevel, there, C bevel, oops, 0.5, and then GC. So I have now carved that up, but again I can't weld these together anymore because this has got these extra vertices and polygons and I can only weld faces. So what I need to do now is get rid of these extra bits in the middle and still have the vertices. So I'll sort of show you now. I've deleted that, so I can now, if I move that down again, move it on the y-axis, I'll get it to line up exactly, which since I just moved it up an arbitrary amount it won't, so I'll have to use the put on command again. So right click and left click and left, I get in on that face there, and then right click to execute it, select these two objects and weld. You can see that it welds along these edges, so that's going to work. I'll just use Control Alt Z to take us back a few steps, get that up out of the way. What I want now is multiple versions of this, and I'm going to have to clean up the other faces on this object, so I can do this fairly easily. So I'm just going to do this. I'll do it in pairs because they're not... I can't do them all at once, because if I did that I'd just delete the entire shape. That's why I'm dealing with it in this way. So now if I hit the vertex selection mode, you can see I have a cube that looks very similar to the cube I started with, but it's got these extra verts. That means I'm going to be able to weld this on. So face selection here, right click and right click on put on to clone, and then right click again, and that's put those on, get rid of my original, and there you go. Right, select the entire object, right click and weld, and then inspect all these verts. You can see the vertices have lit up red, which shows they have welded successfully, and we now have one shape. So we're getting somewhere now. Hit tab, it's looking okay. Select this end face, I for identical, so we've got 6 faces selected. Right click and intrude the shape. Right, so I've intruded it a bit, and then we can have a look inside and see how that looks. Right, how is this looking now? Hit the tab key. So these ends need sorting, and that's fairly easy. What I can do is select in here, go I for identical, so you can see all those have been selected, C for connect and bevel, and run some edges out like so. So those will act, now I've hit the tab key again, you can see just act as supporting geometry. We've got some in there from the intrusion. If we go inside, hit the tab key, there's a bit of confusion occurring here because this is rather a long way. So if I select one of these edges here, I for identical, loop, L for loop, I for identical, and then just do circularize, I can bring those in closer to the edge there. Hit tab, that's sorted that out. Right, if I select these, there's no easy way to move them in that I've found anyway. I might be wrong. I tried the slide command, but some slide out as some slide in, so that's not very helpful. So as an alternative to that, I'll select that inner line there, that inner edge, I for identical, whoops, I didn't mean to hit loop there, I for identical, G, that should just take it around on the inside, check nothing else is selected, C to connect it, and then I'm going to bevel it out, so I've got an inner edge here that's to match up with that one, and these two redundant edges, so I'll select those two there, go I for identical and delete those. If I hit the vertex selection there, you can see we've got some redundant vertexes in there, so select the entire object and just clean those up. So if you clean up now, go back to vertex, it's removed any redundant vertices from that. So if we have a look at this with tab, there's only this inner edge to sort out, and this is where I've run into a problem. When I intruded this shape, it intrudes perpendicular to the face, so that's fine there, it comes in there and it comes in, oh hang on a minute, we're inside a cube, so we've intruded perpendicular and the edges have vanished inside the body of the solid, so I can't get hold of this edge. And if I hit the wireframe view, what I've got, it's not very easy to see, but I've actually got edges buried inside the solid shape, so that's bad really. Something's gone a bit wrong there. I've created odd geometry. It's almost worked. If I hit tab and let's see, I can smooth it, so I smooth it a couple of times maybe, and you know, that looks pretty good, but inside not so good. We've got this collision of geometry and I want to avoid that. So okay, close but no cigar. Try again. Let's have a think about this internal geometry issue. So I'm going to create a cube, select the entire object, go to face, and I'm just going to inset it. Well, in this case an arbitrary amount. We'll get onto more precision in a second, and then intrude it, and we're going to look at what happens when it's intruded. I'll use wireframe mode. So this will get strange crossovers if it doesn't complete, you can see you get these inner corners. That's fine as far as it goes. If it does go further, that crosses over, that's bad. There's a sort of ideal point here where if we could get these vertexes to meet, we could eliminate the sides, but what kind of accuracy is involved? Well, as it happens, I accidentally discovered the solution to this previously. So if I inset these by a set amount, say 0.5, and then intrude by a set amount, say 0.5, these vertices here have all lined up in the same place. If I can get hold of one of them, I'll show you what's happening. If I get hold of a vertices and move it, it's leaving the other ones behind, but thanks to our handy cleanup command, we do here a cleanup, then we move this, okay, we can move it all at once. So what happens, let's imagine, if we start to deal with this internal geometry through smoothing, so I hit the S key for smoothing, you can see we've got a nice transition on the inside here, and a circle, or close to a circle, actually it's not quite circular, on the outside. So I see this as another potential solution to the issue, if we can sort out the external geometry, because the internal geometry will sort itself out as it's smoothed. So here's another way of doing things. So what we can do, right, is we want to support the corners on the outside. So at the moment this is all looking pretty broken if you hit the tab key. So we want that external supporting structure. So what I'm going to do, because I can't do it by beveling, or I need to cut some of these lines out, but these lines are needed to maintain this shape, is I'm going to select opposite faces like so and extrude them a bit, holding the control key down like so, and then do this again for these opposite faces, so this one, this one, this one, and on the other side. So a bit like deleting the geometry to get the right vertexes, what I'm going to do is extrude my geometry to get the right supporting structure for my corners. So it gets a little bit more fiddly each time as more of these faces appear. I could have probably done it by assigning materials and selecting that way, but it's as long as it's short, isn't it? So this is just the last step, and then if I do this right, extrude normal, you can see now, hopefully, that these areas have been sorted out, but we've still got something funny going on in these faces. If I select one of these diagonals, press I for identical, and then C to connect, and hit tab, we can see that it's sorted it out just there. So that's quite handy. The next question is what can we do here? We can extrude this shape. So let's see. This is sort of building it all in one go. So if I use I for identical, having selected those, if I go extrude normal, it's sort of creating my shape all in one go without having to do any welding or anything. We've still got some good geometry and bad geometry mixed in here if you have a look, but we can sort that out as we go along, I think. Right. The question is getting this when we smooth it, S key for smooth, so that it doesn't collapse and we can get some sharp edges here and these faces stay flat. So to do that, I'll do what I did before, use I for identical and then C to connect those, and if I do scale uniform, I can bring those in closer to that edge, and then I for identical there, C to connect and bevel, and that'll put some there, and then here, so go I for identical, C to connect and bevel, and put some in there, hit the tab key. Okay, so it's getting close. It's going to need some sorting out here, but bear in mind these are going to be cylinders, and let's have a look inside. So we've got some additional geometry here that's probably extraneous, so we go I for identical, and we get loads of things selected. This could be a problem. So I could either try and get rid of those now or try and trim them off later on. So let's try taking them out later on. So I'll hit smooth once. Okay, hit the tab key, deselect with spacebar, hit the tab key, have a look how it looks. and then I'll smooth it again. It's starting to look a bit better, but you can see we've got quite a bit of extra geometry floating around in here. So what I'm going to do is tidy that up. So we'll give it a clean up and then continue. So if I take these edges here, now it all depends on, I want to leave some close to the edge to support this corner, so I don't want to take too many out, so I'll just take out a few. Press I for identical, L for loop, and then just look around the shape to see if anything else has accidentally got selected. No. Hit delete. Now you'll notice that these connecting edges here aren't showing up very well. This shows that if we go to vertexes, we've got a lot of redundant vertexes, so I'll just clean those up like so, and that should sort that out. Right, let's have a look along this bit here. Let's see what we can do. Oops, I'll try and be a bit more selective in my selection. So I'll select those, press I for identical, L for loop, have a look round, anything else selected? No, it looks okay. Hit delete, select the entire thing and clean up. Okay, same on the inside. Let's see if we can get these ones we couldn't successfully get last time. So if I select one in the middle and I go Alt G, it'll I can't remember what the name of that command is, but you can see that it's selecting the loops that are parallel, the lines that are parallel. Yes, L for loop, I for identical. Let's see what that's picked out for us. Okay, quite a few. That's good, but nothing critical. So hit delete, select the entire object, right click and clean up. So we've got rid of the most of the extraneous geometry. Interesting things here. Let's do this one. So those there, and I for identical, L for loop. Okay, it's not too bad. Delete. I'll clean up again. Just you could do all the cleaning up at the end. It just makes it clearer when I'm showing you. So what's happening here? Could we get rid of some of these? Well, the way to do this, if I select this vertex, go I for identical, then switch to edge, and L for loop, and just keep hitting the L key a few times, then we can delete those as well. And that's really taking a bit of the weight off this model. So the next step is to consider, well, if we look at this, that's not looking really very circular, is it? It's close, but it's not quite. So what I'm going to do now, I've tidied things up quite a bit, is select these edges here, and if I use the A key I can focus whatever I've got my mouse hovering over, so there and there. So hopefully I've not missed any. Go I for identical, L for loop, and these all want to be circular. I'm going to leave this junction here non-circularized because it's going into the square section, so that'll probably be a nicer join. Right click and circularize. I have some option to make this larger or smaller, but I'm just going to leave it the same, so I'll do it again. So I'm just leaving it the same size. Left click to accept it, and now I've circularized those ends. Select my entire object, smooth it down once more. Now I could leave in that geometry, or I could clean it out as I did a moment ago. I don't think it really matters in this case, since it's not too massive a model to move over rendering. Let's have a look. Hit the tab key, and I think that's looking pretty good to me. Let's have a look inside. Okay, so I'll do a final render for the intro, but that's more or less everything that I really wanted to document. As much for my own benefit as hopefully it will benefit anybody else who's interested in this kind of thing and watches the video, even though it's gone on quite a while. There are a few key concepts that I wanted to really get crystallized, at least in my own mind, with respect to producing what I think here is a pretty decent piece of geometry. If I go to the wireframe view, you can see the internal topology there. So anyway, enough rambling on. I hope you found that interesting and potentially useful, and that you'll go on to model some things in Wings 3D, producing better geometry. Cheers now.